She collapsed after divorce, but the billionaire caught her and said, "She's my wife." Her ex regretted. Hello, my most deeply cherished family. Welcome to Dr. Tom's Love Tales, where every story is a journey of love, emotions, and heartwarming twists. I'm your host, Dr. Tom, and now I ask you, how are you doing today? Each story I craft for you isn't just entertainment, it's a piece of my soul that I pour onto these pages. Every word, every emotion, every moment I share with you comes from a place of genuine care and dedication. Last night, as I was preparing this particular tale, I found myself crying. Not from sadness, but from hope. Because this story reminded me that sometimes, when life breaks us down to our foundation, that's exactly when we discover who we really are. And I truly pray that whatever storm you're facing right now, may you find your strength in these words. And may you also know that you are not alone in this journey. Now, quickly hit that subscribe button and relax. Perhaps grab your favorite drink. And let me tell you about a woman who thought her world had ended. She collapsed after her divorce, but later discovered it was all a beginning to a future she hadn't known yet. Let's begin. Dr. Doris Calder stood in the hospital corridor, her surgical scrubs still damp with perspiration from the most challenging operation of her career. At 32, she had already established herself as one of Chicago's most respected pediatric surgeons. Her colleagues often remarked that Doris possessed an extraordinary gift, not just the technical precision required for delicate childhood surgeries, but an intuitive understanding of what families needed during their darkest hours. Born to hard-working immigrant parents, Doris had learned early that success demanded sacrifice. Her mother, Maria, had cleaned office buildings at night to pay for Doris's medical school textbooks, never once complaining about the burden. This foundation of selfless love shaped everything Doris believed about family, loyalty, and the responsibility that came with healing others. Her dream extended far beyond the prestigious children's hospital where she worked. Doris envisioned opening a free clinic for underprivileged children, a place where no parent would have to choose between rent money and their child's health. She had been quietly saving for years, sketching floor plans during her lunch breaks, researching funding opportunities late into the night. At home, she was simply Mama to 3-year-old Bella, a spirited little girl with her father's dark eyes and her mother's determined chin. Doris's marriage to Dr. Jonathan Hudson had been the kind of fairy tale that medical school classmates whispered about. Two brilliant doctors who had found love amidst the chaos of residency training. The autumn evening felt crisp against Doris's face as she hurried up the front steps of their elegant Lincoln Park townhouse. Her hands trembled with excitement as she fumbled for her keys. Today's surgery had been a complete success. A complex heart repair on a 7-year-old boy whose parents had been told by 3 other hospitals that nothing could be done. "Jonathan! Bella!" she called out as she burst through the front door, her voice echoing through the marble foyer. "I have the most incredible news." The warm scent of roasted chicken filled the air, and she could hear Bella's delighted giggling coming from the kitchen. This was the life they had built together: successful careers, a beautiful home, and their precious daughter who brought light to every room she entered. "Mama's home!" Bella shrieked, running toward her on unsteady toddler legs, her dark curls bouncing with each step. Doris scooped her up, spinning her around as Bella squealed with joy. Jonathan appeared in the doorway, handsome as ever in his perfectly pressed shirt, his smile warm and familiar. "How did the Williams surgery go?" he asked, knowing without her saying that something extraordinary had happened. "Perfect," Doris breathed, setting Bella down but keeping one hand on her daughter's head. "The repair took 6 hours, but his heart is beating strong and steady." The parents cried, Jonathan. They actually cried with relief. During dinner, they sat around their mahogany dining table like a magazine advertisement for successful family life. Bella chattered about her day at preschool, while Jonathan shared stories from his own cardiac surgery practice. They talked about their upcoming anniversary trip, about Bella's Halloween costume, about the charity gala where they would be honored as Chicago's young medical power couple. Later, as Doris tucked Bella into her princess-themed bedroom, her daughter's small hands cupped her face. "Mama, why do you always fix people's hearts?" "Because everyone deserves to have a strong, healthy heart that can love their family," Doris whispered, kissing Bella's forehead. Just like yours loves Daddy and me." As she turned off the bedroom light, Doris felt that familiar surge of gratitude for the life they had created. Everything was exactly as it should be. 2 weeks later, Jonathan's phone buzzed during their Sunday morning breakfast. He glanced at the screen, and something flickered across his face, too quick for Doris to interpret, but present nonetheless. "Sorry, honey," he murmured, declining the call. "Just the hospital." But later that afternoon, while Jonathan was showering, his phone lit up again on their bedroom dresser. The message preview was brief but enough to stop Doris cold. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place? K." Her heart began racing as she stared at the phone. K? She didn't know any K in Jonathan's professional circle. The message felt intimate, personal, in a way that made her stomach clench with sudden dread. When Jonathan emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, Doris held up the phone with shaking hands. "Who's K?" His explanation came too quickly, too smoothly. "Kimberly from the medical supply company. We're negotiating a new contract for the cardiac unit." The rational part of Doris's mind accepted this explanation. Jonathan was always dealing with vendors, consultants, administrative staff. But something deep in her intuition whispered that this was different. Over the following days, she began noticing patterns that had previously escaped her attention. Jonathan's late nights at the hospital increased dramatically. He started taking calls in his home office with the door closed. When she asked about his day, his answers became vague, distracted. During their weekly dinner at Maria's house, Doris found herself confiding in her mother while Bella played in the backyard. "Misha, what's troubling you?" Maria asked, her weathered hands covering Doris's. "You look like you haven't slept properly in weeks." "It's probably nothing," Doris said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Jonathan's been different lately." "Distant." Maria's expression grew serious. She had raised 4 children and buried 1 husband. She understood the subtle signs of trouble in a marriage. "Well, trust your instincts, Doris. At least they've never failed you before." The truth finally revealed itself on a rainy Thursday evening in November. Jonathan had claimed he was working late again, but when Doris called the hospital to speak with him about Bella's parent-teacher conference, the charge nurse informed her that Dr. Hudson had left hours ago. Confused and increasingly worried, Doris decided to drive to the hospital herself. Maybe there had been some miscommunication. Maybe he was in a different department, dealing with an emergency. As she pulled into the hospital parking garage, her headlights swept across Jonathan's BMW in the far corner. But he wasn't alone. Through the rain-streaked windshield, she could see 2 figures in the front seat, embracing with the passion of lovers who had been apart too long. The woman had long blonde hair and wore scrubs from the cardiovascular unit. When they finally separated, Doris recognized her, Dr. Catherine Wells, a cardiac nurse who had worked closely with Jonathan for the past year. Doris sat in her car for 20 minutes, watching them talk and laugh and touch each other with the easy intimacy of an established relationship. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white, but she couldn't bring herself to move. When she finally drove home, her mind felt strangely detached from her body. She paid the babysitter, checked on sleeping Bella, and waited in their bedroom for Jonathan to return with whatever lie he had prepared. He arrived home at midnight, claiming an emergency surgery had run late, but when Doris asked him to show her his phone, to prove where he had been, Jonathan's mask finally slipped. "What's gotten into you?" he demanded, his voice cold and defensive. "Since when do I need to account for every minute of my time?" "Since you started lying to me," Doris replied, surprised by her own steadiness. "I saw you with Catherine Wells tonight." For a moment, Jonathan's face went completely blank. Then he laughed, a sound so dismissive and cruel that it felt like a physical blow. "So what if you did?" he said, loosening his tie with deliberate casualness. "What exactly do you think you're going to do about it? Divorce me? Take Bella away from me?" His smile turned vicious. "I'm Jonathan Hudson. I have connections throughout this city's medical community, the legal community, the social circles we move in. Who do you think they'll believe, you or me?" The words hit Doris like shards of ice. This wasn't the man she had married, the man she had built a life with. This cold, calculating stranger was someone she had never seen before. "There's nothing you can do about this," Jonathan continued, straightening his cufflinks as if they were discussing dinner plans. "So I suggest you learn to accept it." That night, Doris sat in Bella's bedroom, watching her daughter sleep peacefully in her toddler bed. The innocent trust on Bella's face, the complete faith that her parents would always protect her, gave Doris the clarity she needed. With tears streaming down her face, she thought about her mother, who had worked 3 jobs to provide for her family after her father died. She thought about the children she operated on, fighting for their lives with courage that put most adults to shame. She thought about the woman she had always believed herself to be, someone who stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult. By morning, Doris had made her decision. She would not accept Jonathan's betrayal, would not allow her daughter to grow up thinking this was what marriage looked like. She would fight for the life and respect she deserved, regardless of what it cost her. The next day, while Jonathan was at work and Bella was at preschool, Doris made 3 phone calls. The first was to her mother, asking if she and Bella could stay there for a few days. The second was to the best divorce attorney in Chicago, recommended by a colleague who had gone through her own difficult separation. The third call was to her bank, opening a separate account where she could protect the money she had been saving for her clinic. If Jonathan wanted a war, she would be ready for it. The battle for her life, her daughter, and her future had begun. Jonathan's retaliation began within 48 hours of receiving the divorce papers. Doris first noticed something was wrong when Dr. Patricia Newman, the chief of pediatric surgery, called her into the office on a Tuesday morning. "Doris, I need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention," Dr. Newman said, her usually warm demeanor replaced by professional coldness. "There have been questions raised about your recent surgical decisions, particularly the Williams case." Doris felt her blood turn to ice. The Williams surgery had been her greatest success, the 7-year-old boy who was now thriving at home with his grateful parents. "What kind of questions?" "Questions about whether the procedure was necessary, whether you followed proper protocols." Dr. Newman shuffled papers on her desk, without meeting Doris's eyes. "I'm required to initiate a formal review." Over the following weeks, the attacks intensified. Anonymous complaints were filed with the medical board, questioning everything from Doris's bedside manner to her surgical competence. Colleagues who had once sought her expertise suddenly avoided her in hospital corridors. Surgical schedules that had been confirmed for months were mysteriously reassigned to other doctors. The financial pressure became crushing almost immediately. Legal fees for the divorce consumed Doris's savings at an alarming rate, while her reduced surgical schedule cut her income by more than half. She found herself choosing between groceries and Bella's preschool tuition, between paying her lawyer and keeping the lights on in their small apartment. Late one evening, as Doris reviewed yet another legal document demanding additional depositions, her phone rang. It was Dr. James Patterson, a colleague who had worked with her for 5 years. "Doris, I need you to know that what's happening to you isn't right," he said quietly. "But I also need you to understand that Jonathan has made it clear. Supporting you means professional suicide. I have 3 kids to feed. I'm sorry." The line went dead, and Doris realized that Jonathan's influence extended far beyond what she had ever imagined. He wasn't just attacking her marriage, he was destroying her entire professional life. The custody hearing began on a cold February morning. Doris sat beside her attorney, watching Jonathan's legal team. 3 expensive lawyers in perfectly tailored suits arranged their materials with military precision. Jonathan's strategy became clear within the first hour. He painted Doris as an unstable doctor, whose professional failures indicated deeper psychological problems. His lawyers presented a carefully constructed narrative. The devoted father concerned about his daughter's welfare, facing an increasingly erratic ex-wife who couldn't maintain her career or provide stability. "Dr. Calder has been subject to multiple professional complaints in recent months," Jonathan's lead attorney stated. "Her surgical privileges have been questioned, her judgment called into doubt. Is this the environment we want for 3-year-old Bella?" Doris watched in horror as Jonathan took the stand, his performance masterful in its calculated sincerity. He spoke about his concerns for Bella's emotional well-being, about Doris's recent instability and professional difficulties. He even managed to produce tears when describing how difficult the separation had been for their daughter. "I just want what's best for Bella," he said, looking directly at the judge. "She needs stability, security, a parent who can provide consistent care. I fear that Dr. Calder's current circumstances make that impossible." When Doris testified, she felt the weight of 18 months of systematic destruction pressing down on her. Every professional setback, every financial struggle, every moment of exhaustion was used as evidence against her fitness as a mother. The worst moment came when the court-appointed child psychologist testified about Bella's interviews. The child expressed confusion about why her parents no longer lived together. She asked if mommy was broken because daddy said doctors fix broken things. Doris felt her heart shatter. Jonathan had been poisoning their daughter's mind, using Bella's innocent trust to support his case. During recess, Bella's court-appointed advocate approached Doris in the hallway. "That little girl loves you desperately," she whispered. "Don't give up. The truth has a way of revealing itself." Through the darkest months of the legal battle, Maria became Doris's lifeline. Every evening after work, Doris would drive to her mother's small house, where Bella was staying temporarily to provide stability during the court proceedings. "Misha, you look like a ghost," Maria would say, pulling Doris into her arms the moment she walked through the door. "When did you last eat something substantial?" The conversations that followed were Doris's only refuge from the constant stress. While Bella played with her toys in the living room, Doris would collapse at her mother's kitchen table and let the tears fall freely. "I don't know if I can keep fighting," Doris confessed one particularly difficult evening. "Jonathan has unlimited resources, unlimited connections. Maybe Bella would be better off with him." Maria's response was swift and fierce. "Stop that nonsense right now. Some battles choose us, Misha. We don't choose them. But once they find us, we fight with everything we have, because that's what love demands." The financial reality was becoming impossible to ignore. Doris had burned through her savings, borrowed against her retirement fund, and still owed her attorney thousands of dollars. Maria quietly liquidated her own small savings account, the money she had been keeping for emergencies, and pressed the check into Doris's hands. "This is my emergency," Maria said firmly when Doris protested. "My daughter and granddaughter need help. What else could be more important?" During those months, Bella's presence provided both comfort and additional heartbreak. The little girl would ask questions that pierced Doris's soul. "Mama, why does Daddy say you're too sad to take care of me?" Or "When are you coming home to stay?" Doris would hold her daughter close, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "Mama is fighting very hard to make sure we can be together always. Sometimes grown-up problems take time to fix." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Catherine Wells, the woman who had destroyed Doris's marriage, approached Doris's attorney with evidence that would change everything. "I can't live with this anymore. I didn't expect things to get to this stage," Catherine said, her hands shaking as she handed over a folder, thick with documents. "Jonathan has been falsifying medical records to support the malpractice claims against Dr. Calder. He's been manipulating colleagues, threatening people's careers if they support her. All of this happening because of me. I have emails, recorded conversations, financial records showing payments to people who filed false complaints. I really don't want to be part of this anymore." The final hearing took place on a bright April morning. As Catherine Wells testified about Jonathan's systematic campaign of professional sabotage, Doris watched her ex-husband's carefully constructed facade crumble. His lawyers scrambled to control the damage, but the evidence was overwhelming. Judge Margaret Chen delivered her ruling with cold precision. "This court finds that Dr. Hudson engaged in a calculated campaign to destroy Dr. Calder's professional reputation and financial stability in order to gain advantage in these custody proceedings. Such behavior demonstrates a fundamental lack of integrity and raises serious questions about his fitness as a parent." Full custody of Bella was awarded to Doris. Jonathan's visitation rights were limited and supervised. The malpractice claims were dismissed with prejudice, and the medical board issued a formal apology to Doris. But as Doris sat in the courthouse hallway afterward, holding the court order that vindicated her completely, the victory felt strangely hollow. She had won, but at tremendous cost. Her professional reputation would take years to rebuild. Her savings were gone. Her trust in people she had once considered friends was shattered. Most painfully, she was sitting alone. There was no one to celebrate with except Bella, who was too young to understand the significance of what had just happened. The isolation of her triumph felt almost as devastating as the battles that had preceded it. 18 months of war had ended, but Doris wasn't sure she recognized the woman who had survived it anymore. Have you ever experienced such a victory that felt so empty? Drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. The legal warfare had pushed Doris beyond every limit she thought she possessed. As she finally stood up and headed outside the Cook County Family Court building, clutching the final custody ruling that declared her the victor, her body trembled with exhaustion that went bone deep. She hadn't eaten a full meal in 3 days, surviving on coffee and the adrenaline that had carried her through the final hearings. Sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford between preparing legal documents, maintaining her reduced surgical schedule, and caring for Bella during their precious supervised visits. Rest was impossible, The weight loss was dramatic. Her scrubs hung loose on her frame, and colleagues who still spoke to her expressed concern about her gaunt appearance. But Doris had learned to push through physical discomfort. When you're fighting for your child's future, personal needs become secondary. Now, descending the courthouse steps with her lawyer already rushing off to another case, Doris felt the full impact of her isolation. She had won everything: custody, vindication, the exposure of Jonathan's lies, but she was experiencing it alone. Maria was watching Bella, waiting anxiously for news, but in this moment of supposed triumph, Doris felt more alone than ever. Her vision began to blur as she reached the bottom step. The Chicago afternoon sun seemed impossibly bright, and the sounds of traffic and pedestrians became muffled, as if she were hearing them from underwater. She paused, gripping the cold stone railing, trying to steady herself. The panic that followed was swift and overwhelming. Not only was her body failing her at this crucial moment, but the financial implications of a medical emergency terrified her more than the physical symptoms. Her insurance had lapsed during the legal battle, and she had no emergency fund left. The irony wasn't lost on her: a doctor too poor to afford medical care. She tried to take another step forward, but her legs buckled beneath her. The world tilted sideways, and she felt herself falling toward the unforgiving concrete sidewalk. But strong arms caught her before she hit the ground, preventing what could have been a serious head injury. Through her fading consciousness, she heard a deep voice with a slight working-class accent. "Hey there, I've got you. Easy now." The man holding her wore a simple Navy work uniform with Brooks Auto Repair embroidered on the chest pocket. His hands, she noticed even in her disoriented state, were calloused and stained with motor oil, but his touch was incredibly gentle as he lowered her carefully to sit on the courthouse steps. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice calm but commanding. "I need you to try to stay with me. You're safe now." Doris tried to speak, but found her throat too dry. She was vaguely aware of other people gathering around, their voices expressing concern and offering unhelpful suggestions. But this stranger, this mechanic, took charge of the situation with surprising authority. "Someone call 911, he directed, never taking his eyes off Doris. "Tell them we have a woman who's collapsed, appears to be dehydrated and exhausted. We need an ambulance at the county courthouse, south entrance." As the paramedics arrived, Doris heard one of them asking routine questions about her medical history and emergency contacts. When they asked if anyone present was family, she expected silence. She had no family in Chicago except Bella, and Maria was across town. But the mechanic's voice came clear and strong. "She's my wife." Even in her weakened state, Doris was startled by the lie. She tried to correct him, but he gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry about anything right now," he said softly. "Just focus on getting better." Doris awakened in a hospital bed at Northwestern Memorial, IV fluids dripping steadily into her arm. The antiseptic smell and rhythmic beeping of monitors were familiar from her professional life, but being the patient instead of the doctor felt surreal and vulnerable. The mechanic sat in the chair beside her bed, still wearing his work uniform, but looking surprisingly at ease in the medical environment. When he noticed her eyes opening, his face brightened with genuine relief. "Welcome back," he said, his voice warm. "You gave us quite a scare out there." "Who are you?" Doris managed to whisper, her throat still dry despite the IV fluids. "Nolan Brooks," he replied, extending his hand in a formal introduction despite the circumstances. "I own a small auto repair shop downtown. I was at the courthouse handling a business dispute when I saw you collapse." Doris studied his face, trying to understand why a complete stranger would involve himself so deeply in her crisis. "But why did you tell them you were my husband?" Nolan's expression grew serious. "Because I could see you were alone and scared. Sometimes the system works better when they think you have someone looking out for you. I hope that was okay." A nurse entered the room, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Brooks, we'll need to discuss discharge planning and follow-up care. The doctor wants to keep you overnight for observation, but your husband has already taken care of all the paperwork and financial arrangements." Doris started to protest about the name confusion and the financial implications, but Nolan quietly interrupted. "The bills are handled. Don't worry about any of that." "I can't let you pay for my medical care," Doris said once the nurse left. "I don't even know you." "You don't owe me anything," Nolan replied firmly. "Sometimes people just need help, and sometimes other people are in a position to provide it. Today you needed help, and I was there. That's all there is to it." Something in his manner, the complete absence of expectation or ulterior motive, allowed Doris to accept what felt like the first genuine kindness she had experienced in months. For the first time since her marriage fell apart, she wasn't facing a crisis alone. "Thank you," she whispered, and meant it more deeply than she had ever meant those words before. Nolan smiled. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be better." In the weeks following her collapse, Nolan appeared in Doris's life with the consistency of sunrise. It began with small gestures that felt too natural to question. A thermos of homemade soup appearing on her doorstep after particularly long shifts. Her temperamental car mysteriously running smoothly after she mentioned it was making strange noises. "You don't have to keep doing this," Doris told him one evening when he arrived with grocery bags and offered to cook dinner while she rested. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself and Bella." "I know you are," Nolan replied, unpacking fresh vegetables with practiced efficiency. "But just because you can handle everything alone doesn't mean you should have to." Bella took to Nolan immediately, with the intuitive trust that children possess for genuinely good people. While Doris remained cautiously grateful, 3-year-old Bella had no such reservations. "Nolan, look what I drew," she would announce, running to him with crayon masterpieces that he would examine with the seriousness of an art critic. "This is extraordinary, Miss Bella," he would say, kneeling to her eye level. "Tell me about these colors you chose here." Watching them together, Doris felt something she hadn't experienced since before her marriage collapsed. Peace. Bella giggled when Nolan made silly voices reading bedtime stories, and she peppered him with endless questions about his work that he answered with infinite patience. "Do you fix every kind of car?" Bella asked one evening, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor while Nolan helped her build a tower with blocks. "Most kinds," Nolan replied seriously. "Cars are like people, Bella. Sometimes they just need someone to pay attention to what's wrong and fix it with care." Doris's protective instincts gradually softened as she witnessed Nolan's consistent kindness. He never overstepped boundaries, never presumed intimacy that hadn't been offered, never made her feel obligated for his help. Instead, he simply showed up, reliably and gently, until his presence became as natural as breathing. The real test came when Doris invited Nolan to join them for Sunday dinner at Maria's house. She had told her mother about the man who had helped her, but Maria's approval wasn't easily won, especially when it came to men in her daughter's life. "So, you fix cars," Maria said, studying Nolan across her kitchen table while Bella played with wooden spoons nearby. "Yes, ma'am. Started working on engines when I was about Bella's age, actually. My grandfather taught me that taking care of things properly means they'll take care of you back." Maria's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "And what do you think about my daughter working so hard to rebuild her life?" "I think Dr. Calder is the strongest person I've ever met," Nolan replied without hesitation. "The way she's fought for Bella, the way she's maintained her integrity through everything she's faced, it's remarkable. Bella's lucky to have a mother who would sacrifice everything for her daughter's well-being." Later, while Doris helped Maria with dishes, Nolan sat on the back porch with Bella, teaching her to identify different tools from his small toolkit that he kept in his truck. "This is a socket wrench," he explained, letting her hold the tool carefully. "See how it fits perfectly with this bolt? Everything has its right partner, something that makes it work better." Through the kitchen window, Doris watched her daughter's face light up with fascination. She had never seen Bella so engaged with anyone except family. "That man loves you both," Maria whispered to Doris, drying a plate slowly. "I can see it in how he looks at you, at Bella. And you're glowing, Mia. I haven't seen you this happy since before, well, in a long time." "It's too soon," Doris protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Love doesn't follow timelines," Maria replied wisely. "Sometimes it comes exactly when we need it most." The weekend trip to Lake Michigan happened almost by accident. Bella had been fascinated by Nolan's stories about visiting the lakefront as a child, and when he suggested they spend Saturday exploring the shore, Doris found herself saying yes before her cautious mind could intervene. Watching Bella chase waves while staying safely in the shallow water, Doris felt her remaining walls begin to crumble. Nolan sat beside her on the sand, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I've been thinking about expanding my business," he said, his voice carefully casual. "Maybe helping other mechanics start their own shops, providing resources and training." "That sounds wonderful," Doris replied, surprised by how much she wanted to know about his dreams. "You'd be good at that, teaching people, supporting them." "What about you?" Nolan asked. "When all this legal chaos settles, what do you want to build?" Doris told him about her dream clinic, about wanting to provide free medical care for children whose families couldn't afford it. She found herself sharing details she had never discussed with anyone except Maria. Her detailed business plans, her vision of a place where no child would go without treatment because of money. "What if I could help make that happen someday?" Nolan asked quietly. "You're a mechanic with a good heart, not a miracle worker." Doris laughed, but warmth spread through her chest at his immediate support of her dreams. That evening, after Bella fell asleep in the small beach cottage they had rented for the night, Doris and Nolan sat on the porch listening to waves lap against the shore. When he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. "I never thought I would trust someone with my heart again," she whispered. "With her heart, too." "You're both safe with me," Nolan replied, lifting her hand to his lips, "always." When they made love that night, it was with a tenderness that felt like healing, gentle and patient, and filled with promise for the future they were beginning to build together. The magazine was sitting innocuously in the waiting room of Bella's pediatrician's office, its glossy cover featuring the bold headline, "Automotive Empire, from Garage to Global Domination." Doris picked it up absently while waiting for Bella's routine checkup, expecting nothing more than light reading to pass the time. But the photograph on the cover stopped her cold. There, in an expensive tailored suit, standing beside a fleet of luxury sports cars, was Nolan. But the caption beneath read, "Nolan Brooks Delgado, CEO of Brooks Delgado Automotive, building a $3.7 billion empire, one shop at a time." Doris's hands began trembling as she flipped through the article with growing horror. The story detailed how Nolan had built a supercar dealership and luxury auto repair empire spanning 12 countries. The modest mechanic she had fallen in love with was actually one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in the automotive industry. Every detail of their relationship suddenly took on a different, more painful meaning. The way he always seemed to have money for emergencies, of course he did. How he had known someone to get her the best legal representation during her follow-up custody battle he could afford to make those connections. The ease with which he had handled her hospital bills that first day pocket change to a billionaire. The article mentioned his recent acquisition of a small repair shop in downtown Chicago, describing it as Brooks Delgado's latest expansion into the working-class automotive market. The address listed was the same shop where Nolan had claimed to work. Doris felt physically sick as the full scope of his deception became clear. He hadn't been a simple mechanic trying to help a struggling single mother. He had been a billionaire playing a role, experimenting with ordinary life, while lying to someone who had trusted him with her heart and her daughter's affection. "Dr. Calder." The nurse called Bella's name, but Doris barely heard her. She was staring at a photograph of Nolan at some charity gala, surrounded by Chicago's elite, the same social circles where she and Jonathan had once moved, the same world that had turned against her during the divorce. Had this all been some elaborate game to him? Had her struggles, her vulnerability, her desperate gratitude for his help been nothing more than entertainment for a bored billionaire? The next morning, Doris arranged for Maria to watch Bella and drove straight to the gleaming downtown headquarters of Brooks Delgado Automotive. The 40-story building was a monument to wealth and power, its lobby filled with displays of million-dollar supercars that she now realized Nolan owned. Security guards in the lobby clearly recognized her, which only confirmed how deeply the deception ran. They didn't question her presence or ask for identification. Instead, they simply directed her to the executive elevator that would take her directly to the top floor. Nolan's office was larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Chicago, and his desk was a massive slab of polished mahogany that probably cost more than she made in a year. He sat behind it in a perfectly fitted business suit, reviewing quarterly reports with the focused intensity of a man accustomed to controlling billions of dollars. When she burst through his office doors, he looked up with an expression of shock that quickly transformed into something approaching panic. "Doris, please let me explain." "Explain what?" she interrupted, her voice shaking with fury. "How you've been lying to me from the moment we met. How you thought it would be amusing to play mechanic while deceiving someone who trusted you with her child." Nolan immediately dismissed his assistant and came around the desk, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "I never lied about my feelings for you or Bella. That was real, all of it. Real." Doris laughed bitterly. "You're a billionaire who's been pretending to be a working-class mechanic. You've been lying about who you are, what you do, your entire existence. How is any of that real? Because everything I felt, everything I did for you both, that came from my heart, not my bank account." Nolan pleaded desperately. "I love you, Doris. I love Bella. That was never a lie. You don't even understand what you've done, Doris said, tears streaming down her face. I'm a woman who just survived having her entire life destroyed by a man who lied to her. I trusted you with my heart, with my daughter's heart, and you've been deceiving us from day one. I was terrified you'd see the money instead of me, Nolan said, his voice breaking. Every other woman I'd ever met loved what I could buy, not who I was. I wanted you to know me, the real you. Doris stepped backward toward the door. I don't even know who you are. What would you do in Doris's position? Share your honest thoughts below. The silence that followed their confrontation felt deafening. Doris threw herself into rebuilding her life with the same fierce determination that had carried her through the custody battle. Her surgical schedule slowly returned to normal as the medical board's investigation concluded, fully clearing her of all charges and formally acknowledging the false claims filed against her. But the victories felt hollow without anyone to share them with. When she successfully completed a particularly challenging surgery on a newborn with a rare heart defect, she found herself reaching for her phone to text Nolan before remembering that he was no longer part of her life. Bella's questions were the hardest to bear. Where's Nolan, Mama? Why doesn't he come for dinner anymore? The little girl would ask with the innocent persistence of a 3-year-old who couldn't understand why someone she loved had simply vanished. Sometimes people can't stay in our lives, baby, Doris would explain, her heart breaking a little more each time. But that doesn't mean the love wasn't real. Meanwhile, Nolan had returned to his corporate existence, but the transition felt like wearing clothes that no longer fit. Board meetings that had once energized him now seemed pointless. The thrill of closing multi-million-dollar deals paled in comparison to the simple joy of making Bella laugh or watching Doris's face light up when she talked about her dreams. He kept a framed photograph of Bella on his desk, the one where she was showing off a crayon drawing she had made for him. His assistant had asked about it once, and Nolan had simply said, "Someone very important to me." The anonymous donation appeared in Doris's bank account on a Tuesday morning in July. The amount was exactly what she had calculated she would need to open her free clinic, down to the last dollar. No explanation accompanied the transfer, but Doris knew immediately where it had come from. She stared at the bank statement for an hour, torn between gratitude and fury. Even in their separation, Nolan was still trying to take care of her, still trying to make her dreams come true. But accepting his money felt like accepting his deception, like admitting that his wealth could solve problems that love couldn't. For 3 days, she left the money untouched while she wrestled with her conscience. Finally, she made the decision to return it. She wouldn't build her future on a foundation of lies, no matter how well-intentioned. But when she tried to transfer the money back, the account number had been closed. The funds were hers whether she wanted them or not. Nolan's final act of love disguised as anonymous charity. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Thursday in August. Maria had suffered a massive heart attack and was in intensive care at Northwestern Memorial. Doris rushed to the hospital, her medical training warring with her terror as a daughter facing the possible loss of her mother. She's stable, the cardiologist assured her, but it was serious. She's going to need significant lifestyle changes and ongoing care. Sitting beside Maria's hospital bed, watching monitors track her mother's vital signs, Doris felt the weight of how alone she truly was. If something happened to Maria, she and Bella would have no one left in the world. When Maria finally awakened, her first words were characteristically direct. "Miga, what happened to that nice man who cared about you?" "Nolan? Mama, you need to rest," Doris said, avoiding the question. "I almost died," Maria replied with weak but stubborn determination. "I don't have time for rest. I have things to say while I still can." Doris reluctantly explained about Nolan's deception, about his billions and his lies. She expected her mother to be outraged on her behalf, to validate her decision to end the relationship. Instead, Maria was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "So, he lied about having money, not about loving you. He lied about everything," Doris protested. "Did he lie about caring for Bella? About making you both feel safe and loved? About wanting to build a life with you?" Maria's questions were gentle but persistent. "That's not the point." "That's exactly the point," Maria interrupted. "I watched that man with you, with Bella. He looked at you both like you were his world. Some lies come from fear, Mija, not from malice. Jonathan's lies were meant to hurt you. This man's lies were meant to protect what you had together." Doris felt tears gathering in her eyes. "I don't know if I can trust him again." "Trust isn't about never being hurt," Maria said softly. It's about choosing love even when love is complicated. That little girl asks about him every day. And you're not angry anymore. You're heartbroken. There's a difference. 3 weeks after Maria's heart attack, Doris found herself standing outside the Brooks Delgado Automotive Building for the second time. But this visit felt different, not driven by anger and betrayal, but by a quiet determination to find the truth beneath the lies. She had spent sleepless nights replaying every moment of their relationship, searching for signs of deception she might have missed. What she found instead were memories of genuine kindness, of a man who had shown up consistently for her and Bella when they needed him most. The money had been hidden, but the love she was beginning to believe that had been real. The same security guards nodded respectfully as she entered. But this time she noticed something she had missed in her fury weeks earlier. Near the main elevator was a small display case containing photographs of Brooks Delgado's community outreach programs. In one image, she recognized the familiar hands of someone teaching a young person about car engines. The caption read, "CEO Nolan Brooks personally mentors at-risk youth in automotive skills training." The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt longer this time, each floor giving her another moment to question her decision. When the doors opened to reveal Nolan's assistant, the woman's face brightened with genuine warmth. "Dr. Calder, he's in his office. Should I?" "I'll announce myself," Doris said quietly. Nolan was standing at his office windows, looking out at the Chicago skyline. He had lost weight, she noticed, and his usually perfect posture seemed weighted with exhaustion. When he turned at the sound of her entrance, his face showed a mixture of hope and wariness that broke her heart. "I wasn't sure you'd ever want to see me again," he said simply. "I wasn't sure either," Doris admitted, staying near the door. "But I need to understand something. When you were with us, with Bella and me, who were you really?" Nolan moved away from the window but kept his distance, respecting the space she needed. "I was exactly who I wanted to be. The man I am when nobody's expecting me to be a CEO or a billionaire or anything other than just myself. But that garage, that uniform, the whole story about starting from nothing." "I did start from nothing," Nolan interrupted gently. "My grandfather owned a small repair shop in Detroit. I spent every summer there learning about engines, about hard work, about taking care of things properly. When I bought that shop in Chicago, it wasn't for business expansion. It was because I missed that life. Missed working with my hands." Doris studied his face, searching for any sign of the calculated manipulation she had convinced herself existed. Instead, she saw vulnerability and regret. "I go there when the corporate world becomes too much," Nolan continued. "I put on that uniform and I remember who I was before all this." He gestured at the expensive office. "Before the money changed how people see me." "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" "Because every other woman I'd ever dated loved my net worth more than me," Nolan said with painful honesty. "They saw the cars, the houses, the lifestyle, and that's what they fell in love with. When I met you, when I saw how you cared for Bella, how you fought for what mattered, I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I own." Doris moved closer, drawn by the raw honesty in his voice. "I fell in love with Nolan the mechanic," she said slowly. "The man who caught me when I fell, who made Bella feel safe, who sat with me in the hospital. Was any of that real?" "All of it," Nolan said desperately. "Every moment, every feeling, every time I told you I loved you. That was the most real thing I've ever experienced. The only lie was the bank account, Doris. Everything else was true. The money you donated to my clinic, I wanted to support your dream, even if I couldn't be part of it," Nolan said. "You're going to change children's lives with that clinic. Whether you love me or hate me. That work matters." Doris felt the last of her anger melting away, replaced by something more complex, understanding mixed with lingering hurt. "If we're going to have any chance at this, no more lies. Ever. About anything. No more lies," Nolan promised. "Even when the truth is difficult." "Then tell me the truth now. What do you want from me? From us?" Nolan's answer came without hesitation. "I want to marry you. I want to adopt Bella legally, if she'll have me. I want to help you build your clinic and support your dreams. I want to grow old with you and give Bella brothers and sisters who'll love her as much as I do." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying in their completeness. "And I want to earn back your trust," Nolan added quietly. "However long that takes." Doris closed the remaining distance between them, reaching up to touch his face. "Bella asks about you every day. She doesn't understand why her Nolan disappeared. I've missed her so much, Nolan whispered. I've missed you both every single day. If we do this, Doris said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, we build it on truth, complete transparency. No more protecting me from who you really are. I promise, Nolan said, covering her hand with his. Will you marry me, Doris? Will you let me be Bella's father? Will you trust me with your hearts one more time? The answer came easier than she had expected. Yes. 6 months later, Dr. Doris Calder became Mrs. Doris Brooks Delgado, in a ceremony that perfectly blended their two worlds. The venue was Maria's parish church, decorated simply with white roses and baby's breath. But the guest list included everyone from hospital colleagues to automotive industry leaders to the mechanics from Nolan's downtown shop. Bella, now 4, and delighted to finally have her Nolan back permanently, walked down the aisle as their flower girl in a white dress with a tool belt around her waist, her own idea that had made both Doris and Nolan cry with laughter. Today, we're not just joining two people, the priest said during the ceremony. We're creating a family built on love, honesty, and second chances. As they exchanged vows, Doris caught sight of Jonathan sitting in the back pew. He had come alone. Catherine Wells had left him after her confession. Now his presence served as a reminder of what Doris had lost and what she had gained. Jonathan watched with regret how his single action now gave another man full rights to the happy family he once had. Jonathan represented a love built on lies and status. Nolan represented love built on truth and genuine partnership. I promise to love you in wealth and in simplicity, Doris said, looking into Nolan's eyes, in truth and in forgiveness, as a woman, as a mother, as a partner in all things. The reception was held at Maria's house, the backyard transformed with string lights and the same mariachi band that had played at Doris's quinceañera years earlier. Bella spent the evening teaching wedding guests about the different types of wrenches she had learned from her new daddy, while Doris danced with her husband under the same stars that had witnessed so much pain and healing. 2 years later, as Doris cut the ribbon on the Bella Brooks Delgado Free Pediatric Clinic, she held their 6-month-old son in her arms, while Bella and Nolan cheered from the crowd. The clinic served children regardless of their family's ability to pay, funded by the Brooks Delgado Foundation and staffed by doctors who believed that healthcare was a right, not a privilege. Their love story had begun with a collapse and a lie, but it had grown into something built on truth, trust, and the understanding that sometimes the most beautiful futures are born from the most painful endings. Doris's journey teaches us that sometimes the most devastating betrayals prepare us for the most beautiful love stories. Doris had to lose everything to discover what she truly deserved. Her collapse wasn't her ending, it was her beginning, and perhaps that's true for all of us. Sometimes we have to fall completely to be caught by the right person. My dear family, if this story touched your heart, kindly like, subscribe, and comment below what part moved you most. As I close this story, I want to encourage you, whatever collapse you're facing today, remember that falling can be the first step toward flying. Your story isn't over, it's just beginning a new chapter. Thank you for allowing me to share this journey with you. Your support, your comments, your presence here means more than you know. Until our next story, remember, you are loved, you are valued, and you are never alone.